Well, good morning, Sean.
Good morning, John.
You been up all night?
Well, I was up a good bit of the night because it was a much more interesting election than most people, including the pollsters, imagined.
Well, I haven't introduced you. You are our sage from the Northwoods, and you've been kicking around politics and watching history for a few years. And you're just the guy to give us a commentary. And I'd like to focus on the macro, the big takeaways that you saw from yesterday's election.
Well, it was interesting to me. The final result, which is not yet final, was not what very many people were predicting. So you still have quite a divided country, but it's a division that I think accords with the expectation of the founding fathers of America, that you wanted to have, countervailing forces at work in the center of the national government. So you're going to see in a midterm election swing away from the president's party, but much, much more moderately so than was expected. Most people, myself included, I thought the Republicans would come out of this with anywhere between 35 and 50 seat gain. Looks like their seat gain, which will be enough to give them the leadership of the House of Representatives, it looks like the seat gain will be something like probably 7 to 12 seats, which is well below expectations and below the norm, which would be twice or three times that. Barack Obama in 2010, after having won the big victory in 2008, lost 65 Democratic seats in the off-year elections of 2010. So point number one is a surprise. Yes, division, but more balance. My guess at this point, the Republicans will take over the House of Representatives, but by roughly the same margin as the Democrats had it last time. The Democrats had I think it was 220 to 208 or something, basically 8 to 10 seats. I think the Republicans will move into that space. It might be a bit higher. They might get to about 2015. My guess at this point, and it's an educated guess because lots of votes still to be counted in Senate races in places like Nevada, and Georgia's pretty well in now, Arizona, and off we go again. We're going to have what we had last time. Georgia is going to decide, I think, with a runoff election in 4 weeks' time, who will control the Senate. I think at this point, modest advantage to the Democrats, which would mean 50-50 with the vice president voting with the Democrats. But I wouldn't bet a lot of money at this point in time. Issues mattered in this election. You can see the effect of the economic issues along the East Coast. Some very good incumbent Democratic congressmen lost, no doubt in my mind, in places like New Jersey. Tom Malinowski, a very highly regarded Democratic congressman, I think in his second or third term, lost to the son of a former Republican governor in New Jersey. And I would bet that if you disentangle the issues there, the economic issues were really important. On the other hand, you and I were chatting earlier, the Senate race in New Hampshire, which a lot of people were saying was going to be very close, turned out to be not close at all. The incumbent Maggie Hassan, who won that seat by 1,200 votes in a small population state, admittedly, last time, she'll win it this time by 60,000. And I have a feeling that if you do some polling there, you'll find that the women of New Hampshire quietly went out and voted in a way that they maybe didn't broadcast as widely as you might have imagined. Crime. New York State is really interesting. The Democrats should be concerned about what happened last night in New York State. Why? Because it's a very blue state. The Republicans haven't won a governor's race there in 20 years. They didn't win last night, but they got much closer than anybody would have imagined a month ago. Crime was clearly an issue. The Republicans picked up on that. That's going to give them some gains in the House in New York. And it looks like they're going to have a trophy win with Sean Patrick Maloney, who is a part of the Democratic leadership. He looks like he's going down to defeat in the 17th congressional district in the Hudson Valley. And in terms of winners and losers, I think Joe Biden was a winner, not by a great margin, but he can point to the overall result and say, well, look at this. I did much better than my old boss, Barack Obama. I did quite well, given that I'm an incumbent president, where the swing in that first midterm is always away from the incumbent's party. And so I think Biden did better than a lot of people were expecting. I suspect probably even better than he thought. I think Donald Trump is a loser to some degree, and maybe to an even greater degree, because I think a big winner last night was the reelected Republican governor in Florida. And I think Ron DeSantis surely now looks like the formidable frontrunner for the Republican nomination for 2024. And I'll just add this, that there could be a very interesting rumble in the jungle a month from now in the runoff in Georgia, because the Democratic incumbent, Reverend Warnock, is leading Herschel Walker, the great football star, by about 0.5%, I think 35,000 votes, but he's not going to get to 50%. So that is going to trigger, as it did last time in Georgia, in both seats last time, both Senate seats went to a runoff, if you can recall. And the reason the Democrats actually had the majority in the Senate this past 2 years is miraculously they won both of those Senate runoffs. Well, in that Senate race, which is now underway, and it will determine, I think, who is going to have the control of the Senate, I think you're going to see DeSantis, who's already putting space between himself and his erstwhile friend, President Trump, ex-President Trump. I think you're going to see Trump and DeSantis potentially get involved in that runoff in Georgia, because it will be critical in terms of deciding who controls the Senate if what I see now continues over the next few hours and few days. And that could be a really critical contest affecting the Republican nominee for 2024. That seems like a grand prediction, but every Republican in the country will be looking at that massive win. DeSantis beat Charlie Crist by 20 points. He was going to win, but his margin of victory is very impressive, and it'll be impressing a lot of Republican delegates across the country this morning.
Are the Republicans going to become the good old party again?
Well, I wouldn't say they're there quite yet, but there was a very interesting congressional result in the 3rd District of Colorado last time, what turns out to be a complete yahoo, a woman named Lauren Boebert, first time Republican congresswoman from the 3rd District of Colorado. She spent the last 2 years just making, as far as I'm concerned, a complete fool of herself. She was not expected to lose last night. With most of the votes counted, not all, but most of the votes counted, she looks like she's going to lose. So that's a place where the Republicans seem to have said enough. There are other places. If you look at the governor's race in Arizona, it's not settled yet, but the former news anchor for one of the TV stations in Phoenix, a woman named Carrie Lake, an election denier, a bunch of very crazy things that she said and still says, she is trailing, not by much, but she's trailing the Democrat by a few points. She might still win that. It's close. There are signs that in places where last time there weren't any signs, that a more traditional Republican mainstream is asserting itself. The Republicans this morning will be looking at Pennsylvania, which they lost by, a couple of percentage points. And I don't think there's any doubt that had they kept Donald Trump and his candidate, Dr. Oz, out of the equation and nominated just a more traditional Republican nominee, like the fellow who just retired, Senator Toomey, I think they may very well have held on to Pennsylvania last night. I mean, if they look at some of those Senate races that they're likely going to lose, certainly Pennsylvania looks like it's gone. Georgia, I put a small amount of money that the Democratic incumbent will win that in the runoff. Where else? I'll have to think about it. But, Trump hurt himself, and he hurt the Republican Party by forcing very irregular people onto the ticket. And Mitch McConnell has been saying this for months now, that Trump should stay home because he's hurting. And certainly to the extent that places like Georgia are going to be determinative in who gets the Senate, it looks like McConnell is going to be proven right.
Well, that's a great summary for us, and we'll look forward to getting you on again soon.
I want to say hello to everyone. Unfortunately, I have to go to a funeral at the point when your dog bone portfolio meets at 11 o'clock. So I'm living vicariously. I say to my friends in your circle, John, through you, on a splendid sunny November morning here on the edge of Algonquin Park.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Sean.